We don't live in a pure meritocracy where everybody who works hard enough then is going to be successful. No, it's actually a lot of unfair advantages at play, and we broke down what those unfair advantages are.
Ash Ali and Hasan Kubba, authors of The Unfair Advantage, Business Book of the Year 2021.
The unfair advantage.
The unfair advantage.
How you already have what it takes to succeed.
They talk about talent. They're called talent shows. If you look at sports, people will talk about talent all day, every day. But suddenly, when it comes to entrepreneurship, or it comes to being smart, or it comes to success, no, talent doesn't exist. It's just about how much work you put in. Why is it different? This idea of saving money to become wealthy. And honestly, it's one of the worst pieces of advice you can ever receive, is to think that you're going to become wealthy by saving money. And I hear this a lot, and I don't know if you hear this as well. Sometimes, this is quite common, by the way. Some wealthy people.
On today's episode of the Inkspired Mind podcast, I'm joined by Hasan Kubba, who is a founder, author, and a startup strategist. Hasan has a wealth of experience in the business world. He began his educational journey studying medicine at the university, but eventually dropped out and pursued a degree in economics. Despite having no entrepreneurial background and being an introvert, Hasan was determined to succeed and took the initiative to invest in an expensive online business course. This decision proved to be a turning point in his journey, as it led him to meet Ash Ali, who introduced him to the world of tech startups. Driven by a desire to share his knowledge and insights with others, Hasan wrote The Unfair Advantage, a book with Ash Ali that was awarded the Business Book of the Year in 2021. We dove more into personal finance, accountability, gratitude, mindset, and a lot more. So without further ado, I'm Jats, and this is the Inkspired Mind podcast. Firstly, thank you so much, Hasan, for coming on the podcast. And I also on live, I want to say thank you once again for inviting to the amazing, the best creator meetup I've had. For people who don't know about your story, if you could just share a bit about yourself to us so we can understand and know you better.
Sure, yeah. Well, thanks for having me, Jess. And so my name's Hasan. I was born in Baghdad in Iraq, and I came to London, and I've lived when I was like 3 years old, so I've lived here my whole life. I was going to be a doctor, which is a classic thing, immigrant family thing, Asian family thing. And but I dropped out of that path and did economics instead, and then the path from there was going to be working in the city in London, so basically finance or banking or something. It just didn't appeal to me. It was like, okay, make a lot of money, which sounds good, but like don't have a lot of time. So what appealed to me was this online course that I saw based on like a 4-hour work week type of vibes, like 4 hour, like live a life of freedom, fun, and adventure was like the tagline. And the idea was how to start a freedom business. This is way back in 2013-ish. So I took this course. It was a big lump sum for me, big investment for me. It was like $2,000. At that time, I was like, okay, this is a lot. But I'd saved up my student loan money, and I was too scared to start. Just didn't go anywhere. I was like ready to get started, ready to get clients, ready to build my business, and it's like, just didn't do anything. I was overly perfecting my website, wasn't ready to launch. Basically, my perfectionism held me back. So what I did is I got some jobs in sales in the city, funnily enough. And so I ended up in the city for a couple of months here, a couple of months there. And then finally that gave me lit a fire in me to actually go, oh my God, I'm working so hard for somebody else. Why don't I work that hard for myself? What's wrong with me? And I was so frustrated. And so I did. I quit and started my own business and started to get clients. So it was a digital marketing agency online. And then I had to like pivot it to make it like a recurring revenue business. And then I did reach that point off. So basically it was like 1.5 to 2 years of super hard work, super long hours. No 4-hour work week after all. And then it went down to 0-hour work week because money was just coming in, and I was just traveling around Southeast Asia, and it was wicked. And then I was like, okay, but what do I do now? I was like, this is cool for a while. And then it's like, well, what's next?
Yeah.
And that's when I met my co-author, Ash Ali.
Yep.
He had just had the IPO with Just Eat. He was one of the earliest team members there. He grew the marketing department from scratch. And so I knew about the online business world. He taught me about the tech startup world. And that's when I was like, oh, interesting. Seed rounds and angel investing and all these terms. or the tech startup world, the Silicon Valley type of world. And it was the insights from that made us write the book. So it was like, okay, what makes somebody successful? Why do we believe in this startup founder and not this other one? Some of them were like, they're good, but like this isn't the right idea. I don't think they'll be able to close a full round of funding. They're not going to convince other investors. Why? And I wanted to tell them why. And I feel like coming up from I grew up on free school meals. I grew up just simple family, going to state school, etc. That's what made me. I wanted to give advice to the people, because most of the people who seemed like they were going to do well had unfair advantages, and they had like private educations, and they had middle class backgrounds. Middle class here in the UK meaning actually quite wealthy. And they could kind of had the connections and had the contingencies and the safety nets to actually go for a tech startup. So that's what inspired us to write the book. We were like, okay, this is the idea. And so that kind of gives you a roundup of where I am today. I've become like a coach to creators. I'm a business coach. I had a lot of big creators early on that became clients of mine, Ali Abdal being one of them. And so, yeah, that's kind of, I do coaching now. I do public speaking. So I'm a professional speaker. I talk about the creator economy. I talk about unfair advantages. And yeah, that's what I've been doing. It's been fun.
All of this incredible stuff from a person who was an introvert.
Yeah.
So how did you actually take that step to go outside your comfort zone and achieve all these things? Because it's interesting.
Yeah, no, I was very shy. No one believes me how shy I was when I was young. I was very shy when I was young. And I was also terrified of public speaking. So it's a bit ironic that now I do public speaking for a living. I think it was just a gradual thing, Jazz. It was just like, how do I push myself outside my comfort zone? Because I just wanted it so badly. I was like, and I still can feel like with my own networking event, and it was just a one-off. We did a creator meetup. That was comfortable. That was nice. But like generally, like if I go to networking events, I'm still not like super 100% comfortable in my skin. I'm just like, I can sometimes feel a bit like I just want to talk to people I already know. Kind of, I still have that instinct in me, and I have to push myself to be like, no, go join another circle, introduce yourself, etc. And I still have to do it. So it's still inside of me, but I've become more of like an in-between, like an ambivert, I would say. I'm introverted, but like less strongly. So I can get a lot of, they say it's about the energy that you get. Do you get energy? Do you get energized from being around people?
Yes.
And I now feel that I do sometimes feel energized around people too. So I think, just over time, I pushed myself outside of my comfort zone. I knew I needed to do it to get the success I needed. Learning sales was a big part of it as well. And I could just see the value of it. And I could see, like, once you start to learn that actually most people are feeling awkward within themselves. Most people don't want to start the conversation. Most people would love it if you start talking to them. Just generally those kinds of things. Like, be interested in other people. A book that helped me early on is a classic, is How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yes.
Such a good book. I need to actually re-listen to that. I think I found it like 10 years ago on like YouTube for free. I think it's past its copyright.
Yes.
I believe. So if you find it, but yeah, sometimes I just get things on Audible anyway, just because it's better app. That's kind of how I did it, just gradually, and I pushed myself to just do it. And
I think it's really nice to hear that even people at your stage still go to events and still feel that kind of little uncomfortable stuff. Because whenever I go, I always try and say that, oh, you should always be outside your comfort zone, but there's always that little thing within us. Is there something you do to build your was there something you've done over time to build your confidence? Because I feel like being outside your comfort is one thing, but then also having the confidence to do stuff and also talk to people and stuff is a different kind of thing. Have you done anything to kind of improve your confidence over time?
I have. When I was at uni, I used to go out with my friend, and we used to get so nervous doing it, but we used to dare each other to go and talk to people. To go, like, we'll just be like, just ask for directions. Where is this shop? Which way is this landmark? And we just slowly kind of realize, oh, actually, most people are friendly, and it's mostly fine. But we still get so nervous, just like to talk to people, or we do dares, we do silly things, we do like really silly things, and it genuinely used to make you feel. But when you're with friends, I used to feel so nervous about it. But when you're with friends and you're laughing, and then you can look back and laugh about it, I think that helped. it didn't like cure things, but just generally. And then just to learn to kind of strike up conversations. Again, I still need to push myself. Like I remember one of the funnier ones is the book, which was my first book. I never thought I'd write a book, and English was kind of my weaker subject at school. We won the Business Book of the Year award, or we were nominated.
Yeah.
Well, we were nominated for the Startup Book of the Year, and we were like, "Oh, wicked! That would be so cool if we win that." And then we won that, and we were like, "Whoa, that's so cool!" And we thought that was it. And then like there was like 12 different categories of like different
So you won in
business
2.
books. And then what happened is we won the overall Business Book of the Year. So we won
Wow.
out of all the category winners, we won that one, which blew our minds. It was so humbling. It was like incredible because we really worked so hard on this book. We had spent years working on the concept. But it was so funny because that was in lockdown, right? So then the network was like on Zoom and stuff. But then there was an in-person one to go and collect the award. And at that event, I was like, me and my co-author, we were like the Business Book of the Year winners. He's quite extroverted, Ash.
Yeah.
But I still felt like uncomfortable to go and talk to people and stuff. I still felt that very familiar, shy feeling of just not wanting to go outside my own bubble of faces that I already recognize and talking to them only. So it's funny, even being the Business Book of the Year award winners, I still felt like I don't want to talk to people, or I don't want to start up conversations. So it's still there. And I feel like people don't talk about that enough. People talk about like, yep, I'm just completely cured. And I feel like even with public speaking, like I used to be terrified of it. I can still feel nervous about it. I can still be nervous on stage to an extent. It's gone down massively though. It's gone down massively. But the whole networking thing, or talking to strangers, if I haven't done it in a while, it goes back to that familiar feeling of just wanting to stay in my comfort zone.
Yeah, and I think building confidence and getting outside your comfort zone is a thing which you have to keep doing. It's like you have to keep repeating this stuff, because if you don't do it for a while, like the lockdown, that whole lockdown really affected me, because before that I was fine, but then I started seeing people and I couldn't build conversations, and it was really difficult.
I know.
So that was great to hear what you've done at uni. And you dropped out of uni in the first 3 or first 6 months when you were doing medicine.
That's
or
right.
wanted to become a doctor.
Yeah.
Without having a plan or anything in your mind.
No, yeah.
How did you take that jump? Like, you were just like, okay, I'll just get out of uni? Because I think many people are at that stage in uni.
Yeah.
And they don't know what to do with life.
Honestly, I haven't spoken about this much. I haven't even spoken about the other thing of daring people out. So this is all exclusives to this podcast. But one of the things was how bad, I haven't spoken much about how terrible I felt at that time. I felt so lost. I remember I was like, this is before, I'm a bit old now, but this is before like real proper streaming came on. It was all like pirated streams and stuff that and I used to just like feel so directionless, and I just felt so, I didn't know what I wanted for my life. I knew I wasn't happy. I knew I don't know what I want for the future. I don't know what I wanted to be. So I used to like just binge watch shows, just stream stuff. So people could much more easily do that now. So I know people can relate to this. They'll just do it on Netflix or whatever, or on YouTube. But I used to just spend my time on my laptop and just be in my bedroom and just be feeling crappy, just feeling really crappy. And I didn't know what I wanted. I just had no idea. And I felt like I felt like a failure. I felt like, oh, am I just quitting because exams are coming up and I haven't studied? Or do I actually not want to go down this path? I had all these thoughts of like, what's going on here? What am I going to do next? And I was like doubting myself. I was like, oh, but maybe I started researching different subjects to study. And I'd never done economics before. And I thought, I can learn about the world, resources, money. It'll be quite interesting to get an overview of what's happening in the world. One of the reasons that I quit medicine is because I felt like I'd have a life of hospitals and nurses and patients and disease and other doctors. And I know a lot of doctors are like that. Their circle is mostly other people who are medics.
Yeah.
So I was like, I want to learn more about the world. But even then I was like, do I really? Or is it just an excuse because I'm trying to just quit? And so it was a very tough time for me, Jess, honestly. It was like,
it's like that rut where you are in and you keep going down the rabbit hole. Whatever you try and do, you give another excuse, but like, is it like, am I doing this because of this, because of that? How did you come out of that? Because I still remember how I felt in 2020 when I first started my self-improvement journey. It was like from one rabbit hole to another rabbit hole and another rabbit hole. It was the worst time of my life. How did you come out of that?
Yeah, I think I convinced myself that yes, it is that I don't want to do economics. It is that I want to just change completely the direction. I don't know what I want to do afterwards. Maybe I'll go and help Iraq. It was like the kind of the earlier days post Saddam, like not that. It was like a good, when did I go to university? Like 2008 ish. So I was like, maybe I'll do that. And then I was just going from there. But I think what I really struggled with is, even when I did economics, I still wasn't like turning up to lectures. I was still getting all these warning emails. I was so stressed out to log into my like university email inbox, because it was full of emails of them threatening to kick me out because I wouldn't turn up to lectures. But I don't know what it was. I didn't have the accountability. I didn't have the drive. Found them boring. I feel like it's kind of one. Lockdown was awful, but one slight benefit for students is that it's all recorded and they can stream them. And for me, that would be amazing, because I probably wouldn't watch them. But then at least when I was cramming, I would like 2x the speed and just like go through them, because we didn't have that. We just had to, like, if you go, like, maybe you can record it. Maybe there's another student that recorded it, like audio only. And I didn't know how to take notes. I just felt very lost. I eventually got the 2-1 at uni. I was like, thank God I got that, and I'm not going to do any more university. That's it. A bachelor's degree is enough for me. But it was tough. I had to repeat a year. It was a whole journey for me.
Wow.
Even though, like, before, I used to just get good grades without trying. But at uni, there was no accountability.
Yeah.
Like there was at school. So I just didn't turn up, and I didn't know what I wanted, and I felt a bit lost at that time. So I feel like, I just got through it. I think one of the things is I used to work on habits before it was a big thing, before Atomic Habits, before any of that. But I used to be too perfectionist. I used to try and build 5 different habits at once. I used to try and, like, I'll go for a morning jog. I'll do meditation. I'll do my affirmations. I used to try these things, and they used to not quite work. And this was also after I left uni and tried to start my business. I was going through the same type of cycle. Like, come on, I need to do this. And I used to be like, oh, I've woken up too late today. Today's ruined. And I used to just write off the whole day. And I know a lot of people watching this can relate to that, because I've spoken to so many people, and I've coached a lot of people now, and even really successful people. A lot of them procrastinate a lot. A lot of them like have imposter syndrome. It's just so common. And I think the key distinction, actually, if I was going to give you one, is to think of progress, not perfection. That was the absolute key for me, is to just be like, okay, as long as I'm just making progress. And then I started to learn. So mentors was huge. So one of my earlier clients and big client that stayed on as a huge client for me in my business, like a multimillionaire guy, very traditional business, just used to hustle, and used to just do a lot of things wrong. So based on like business principles, like you should delegate, you should like manage your time, you should prioritize. I feel like he didn't do that. I feel like he just tried to do everything himself. And he just used to hustle, and he just used to work really hard. And I just think, okay, he's extremely successful despite not following all the advice, despite not doing all the things right, to the book. And what I learned is, and I started learning that from other mentors later, and just to see how imperfect they were, but yet still so successful they were. And I think that's the key distinction, is to know that you don't need to be perfect. You just need to be good enough, or just have one thing that's kind of good enough, one unfair advantage that you double down on, and it's kind of enough.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you still need a certain level of competence for those other weaknesses, but generally you can kind of delegate the stuff that you're not great at. Sometimes you can just have the right timing in the market. Sometimes you can just have the right kind of customers just like you, or clients or users just like your product or your app. So I think, or YouTube videos, let's say, or TikTok videos. So I think it's really key to understand how imperfect like everyone is.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got a picture of Elon right here. A lot of people hate Elon. I really like Elon generally. I know he's imperfect, right? But that's cool, because you see how imperfect he is publicly. And you can see it well. He's still the richest man in the world. And he's got so many flaws.
Yep.
No one can say this is a perfect guy. He's got so many flaws. And yet he's so successful.
Yep.
Right. And I think that's key to learn, is like, you don't need to be perfect, but you need to get the right things done. And as long as you're making progress, it's fine. And I think that's the key. It's like the things that actually move the needle.
Yep.
Especially in business, or like to actually make products or services that people love, to actually make videos that people watch. Like those are the kinds of things to really focus on. Everything else can kind of fall by the wayside. It doesn't matter that much.
I think that's really, really true, because most people forget they're too busy perfecting themselves by all the habits that they don't end up taking any actions.
Yeah.
And that is when they get into the rut of not being successful. Like, I've done everything. Why am I not seeing any progress?
Yeah.
Well, because you forgot to take the actions, which is the most important stuff.
Yep.
And I think I really like the concept about habits and how you start creating one habit at a time. And funny thing is, the next YouTube video I'm working on is based on micro habits.
Nice.
So similar to Atomic Habits, but
Yeah.
this is mainly about how breaking down one habit into small habits and then doing that rather than changing your whole lifestyle. So I really like that part, and I think I'm going to mention that part, this specific clip, in that as well. So just one more thing on habit, which I wanted to ask, is that when trying to build a habit, what is your take on, let's say you want to stick to a habit for a long time? What would be the perfect way, or in your opinion, the perfect way to build a good habit and stick to it?
So the most valuable thing I got out of Atomic Habits, it came out roughly when I was writing my book. So actually, I think I referred to Atomic Habits in the book because I loved it so much.
Yes, you have.
For me, the biggest takeaway. So number one is this idea of like making it small. Like just make it something simple. Make it something you can do in 2 minutes. That's number one. The other thing that was the biggest insight for me, and probably even more impactful than the make it small, is make it fun. Make it pleasurable. Make it what does he say? Make it satisfying. I can't remember the exact phrase he uses. Maybe you remember, but like the point is to make it something you look forward to. So I remember one of the examples they gave is rewarding. That's it. Make it rewarding.
Make it rewarding.
But I think there was there. See, now I can't remember. Was there a distinction that he made of a reward after you've done it versus something that's fun during it?
I think it's making the process fun, but then
That's
ending is you need to have a reward which can kind of motivate you to keep doing that thing again.
The thing for me that really had the impact is the kind of the process being fun. So one thing that I did this year is I invested in like the most expensive gym that you can go to. Yeah. I saw a video of yours about doing a home gym and I was like, great, home gym would be awesome.
Yeah,
I know I won't use it. How do I make it pleasurable for me to go to the gym? This is a really nice way. So the story that really had an impact on me, and I still remember from Atomic Habits, is when he spoke about hand washing, and he started how to build the hand washing habit. I think it was in South Asia or something. And one of the biggest impact things is giving them a soap that smelled nice. And it's something so simple. It just smells nice. People started to just enjoy washing their hands because like, oh, it smells, my hands smell nice. And I think that's so powerful because like, if I can make going to the gym something I look forward to because it's so nice there, then maybe I'll do it. And actually now I have to kind of commute to the gym, which is like a big friction point, but kind of it's not too far from where I work, etc. But yeah, ideally it would have just been a home gym. Like realistically, I'll reduce the friction, make it easy, make it simple. Okay, just make it like there's the gym right next to my house, the gym group, like a kind of cheaper gym, or just to get the equipment and do it at home. Realistically though, I need to kind of make it fun. And I think part of making it so nice, I took Ali Abdel there recently, actually. He was like, whoa, this is crazy. Is the fact that I now go there regularly. And I've got a personal trainer as well, but I still go there sometimes without my personal training session. That gives me accountability. The biggest benefit of the personal trainer for me pushes me further than I push myself, but just to turn up. It's like, I paid for it, I need to turn up. And just having another person. So it's the same with coaching, really. The biggest benefit is like clarity and accountability. So I think, so for me, the habits thing, biggest thing by far is to make it fun somehow, even if in a small way, just something small, just something satisfying. I started to do, he uses the example of flossing. That really worked for me. I just started to, I have generally I've never had any issues at the dentist, etc. But he just said, you need to start focusing on like flossing. They say that every time, right? You need to floss. But specifically, he's like, I can see that the back, the top molars between them, you need to start flossing because that's going to start, you're going to get a cavity there. Yeah. I'm like, oh crap, I've never had one in my life. I need to start doing this. But the fact that it's just like, okay, if I just do that one tooth, sometimes I just tell myself, just convince, like hack your own brain. I'll just do that one tooth at the back, one here, one there. That's enough. Now I start to I floss every time. Satisfying, number one. Yeah. Like now I get satisfaction out of it. My gums don't bleed anymore, etc. I've just built a habit. Now I do most of my teeth, or if not all of them, I floss just because I'm into the habit now. I've got it ready. Yeah. And just starting small. So I think it really makes an impact.
I think it's really nice the way you described it. And I think 3 main important factors is making it fun, having accountability. I think that's really important. And the process of just doing it for a longer period of time. And I think it will become a habit.
Yeah.
One thing which I really like about you, which you talk about in the book right now as well, is accountability.
Mm.
When you were at uni, accountability was important. When you were starting your entrepreneurship journey, accountability was important.
Yeah.
And just in general, accountability, everything you do, and even at gym, it helps you a lot in life.
Massively.
And although now at uni, ChatGPT, I don't know if you've heard of this new AI, which is making life so much easier for
Crazy.
everyone.
I've been playing with that. Can't imagine how people at uni now.
I actually tried it as well, and I was the exact same as you. I didn't bother, even though I have just finished uni like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
In my entire uni life, I probably attended maximum 20 lectures in 4 years, which was a very, very not the best example to set, but I think we can really relate in the sense of like, didn't know what to do, and just, I guess uni was there for, I don't know, for my parents. I don't know about you. But going back to accountability, how can one find a good accountability partner which can also keep you motivated? Because sometimes you may find one who isn't motivated himself and then end up bouncing off the energy to us, and we also become unmotivated.
Yeah. So one thing I missed out from my story of like, so I got some jobs in the city doing sales, and then I quit and I started. But what was different this time also, and this massively made an impact on me, is I had an accountability buddy. And what we would do is, not too far from here in Northwest London, we'd go, there was the London Design Outlet, if people know it. It's near Wembley Stadium. It was new at that time. It was quite new. And there was a Starbucks, I think it's still there. There's a Starbucks above the cinema, and it overlooks, there's like literally above the view or whatever the cinema is there. It overlooks the stadium. And we used to just sit there with our laptops and be like, come on, okay, let's contact 10 potential clients now. Let's email them. Okay, how could we get in touch? How could we do this? And just turning up every day and just pushing each other. It massively helped. It was huge. That was a huge difference for me. How do you find one that keeps you going? You get lucky.
It's like finding a co-founder.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, you have to, some part of it is luck, but also part of it is you being strong enough to push, and hopefully they're strong enough to keep up, or vice versa. Hopefully, so you, like, whenever you're trying to be proactive, then at least you can push it along. Set the example. Look, whenever there's any questions of leadership, questions of like being a good role model, being a good, no one wants to be a role model necessarily, but like, that's just how human beings are. Like, at the end of the day, if somebody could be giving the most amazing, I'll use myself as an example. I gained weight during the lockdown period. I was moving house as well. I had renovations, had some personal health issues, etc. in the family. So yeah, excuses. But the point is, I gained a lot of weight. But I used to be very into nutrition, exercise also, but I didn't used to theoretically. So exercise, I wasn't so good at actually practicing, but nutrition wise, I was actually eating really well. But I was a nerd. I used to procrastinate my exam stuff at uni by just reading up about like nutrition and stuff. For some reason, I just went into this deep rabbit hole. And so I'm actually really knowledgeable when it comes to like nutrition and stuff. But I wouldn't ever want to talk about it, because let me be in shape first. If somebody's like super out of shape, and I don't think I'm that bad, but let's say, let's just do a more extreme example. Somebody's morbidly obese and is telling you how to eat. How much are you going to listen to them? It's just, no matter what, you care about the person saying it. You care about the messenger, not just the message. And I think it's very key to be living the message, and I think for people to listen, I think showing, like, there's something about, like, you could see it. There's something about that where you're like, clearly I should be listening to this person, because clearly they've got this area of their life sorted. And even sometimes not even the same area. I remember there was one guru in marketing, like, incredible guy, really good insights. And he was just really out of shape. But this guy's like a multimillionaire. I used to blow my mind, like, okay, how could you be that wealthy and not get this like part of your life sorted? Obviously, there's a lot more to it, but like, it just, in a simplistic sense, it just feels like, can't you just hire the best dietitians, the best personal trainers, the best coaches, get the best meal delivery, get a private chef to just prepare you all your meals? Can't you get it sorted? Now, obviously, there's some mental health issues maybe, and maybe there's some addiction issues. But the point is, this guy was talking about marketing, but still, in the back of my mind, I'll be thinking, why isn't the rest of your life sorted out? Because that's something you could judge by a cover. And it's like, it's sad. but it's true. It's just how
Yeah.
human beings are. We judge status by physical appearance. That's why one of the things is status, is like your unfair advantage is how you look, how you come across, your accent, how you talk, how you dress. All these things are a big part of it. So yeah, I think it's very important to kind of set the stage, and also just like if it's not working out with an accountability buddy, just look for another one. Or if you have the unfair advantage of money. So look, I think the way accountability is, like, if you can't find an accountability buddy, for some reason you just can't get one. Let's just say theoretically, I know you should be able to get one, especially with the internet. Theoretically, you can't get one. The least you can do is journal. Then at least there's some accountability to yourself. When you're putting it down in the book, you can kind of feel it. It's not as good though, because to actually journal, you need accountability as well. The second one is an accountability buddy, because that's like a peer, and then you can kind of hold each other accountable, and that's great. And the third is having a coach. But like each one kind of is like a bit harder to get, and a coach is like the unfair advantage of having some money to invest in a coach. A coach is the best because it's like you've paid for it. It's a bit like the personal trainer. You've paid for it. You're going to turn up, and they're going to help you get clarity because they know how, they understand coaching. They understand coaching questions and coaching frameworks that really make you think and give you that clarity of like, okay, here's what I need to do this week, and just kind of don't get cluttered in your mind of I don't know what to work on. And then finally, the accountability, because you're going to see them next week, and it's going to feel so awkward telling them you didn't do it.
Yeah.
And how many weeks in a row can you just say, I didn't do it? There's a limit. They don't even need to be harsh. They don't even need to be strict necessarily. It can just be enough for you to hold yourself accountable. So these are the kind of areas I'd love to talk about, accountability.
Yeah, I really love that. And for someone who, let's say, is starting accountability at the journal stage, what would you say are the 3 questions they should ask themselves when journaling, so they can get some clarity in what they're trying to achieve as well?
Yeah, I think it starts with clarity. So it starts with so you kind of have to do the whole thing of like, what do I want to achieve? What do I want? And the flip side to it, which people don't talk about enough, is what do I want to avoid? What do I not want? And I was much more motivated about what I don't want than what I do want. I don't want a job. I don't want a boss. I don't want the 9 to 5. I don't want that commute with everybody wearing suits on the tube that's crammed in the morning. I don't want to dread Sunday nights. I don't want to look at the clock and just can't wait for lunch. I can't wait for the end of the day. That for me is the worst. That for me is like, I can't live that life.
Yep.
That drove me to do this. So it's what do you want to avoid? But also what do you want to achieve? And keep asking yourself why? Why? And it might change over time. And that's why asking it periodically is very important. Once you've got that kind of nailed and you've got some more clarity, and that takes time, and you've got a vision and you can picture it and it makes you excited, there needs to be some emotion there. That's when, from that stage onwards, it now becomes about accountability. There's some clarity in the kind of the tactics that you take, the little strategies and tactics that you take to get to your goal. Oh, and by the way, when you come up with what do you want, and I always tell my coaching clients this, you really have to not be restrained and constrained by the how.
Sometimes when you ask like, what do you want?
Yeah.
It blanks someone. Like,
yeah.
If you ask me, what do I want?
Yeah.
My mind gets blanked. Like, what do I really want? It's difficult to answer that.
It's funnily enough, one of the hardest questions is what do I want? What do you want? And I think it helps to break it down into categories. You might say like one little simple one is health, wealth, relationships, spirituality, happiness. There's kind of 4 different categories. You can kind of go deeper into more specifics. Just kind of say, what do I want for this part of my life? What do I want for me, in terms of my network and people that I know, my relationships and my love life? What do I want in terms of my career, in terms of what I do for work, in terms of money, in terms of wealth, in terms of optionality, in terms of flexibility? What do I want in terms of how I look, how I feel, the energy levels I've got, etc. These are all different areas that you can kind of touch on. And I think it's really important to kind of think about that. What do I want? And diving into why and asking yourself, do I actually want that? Or is that what society tells me? One of the things that really blew me away so one of the jobs I had was alternative investments broker. It was like in the city. It was like a wheeler dealer types. It was so interesting because
it's like the Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah, it really was. It was so funny. There's another film that's also really good for this. I think it's called Boiler Room. I think that's the name of the film.
I think I've heard of it, but I haven't watched it.
So it's very similar to Wolf of Wall Street as a reference. But it wasn't scammy. Like, I think at the time I thought, is this like gray area? I wasn't sure, but looking back on it, I know that they were trying to do a legit thing, but they had no kind of requirements for qualifications. So you had people who were from very kind of disenfranchised, underdog backgrounds. They had like kind of sort of messy personal lives, family lives. They're involved in drugs, they love partying, etc. It was those types. And I worked with these kind of people too once. Not everyone was like that. It was just that was the vibe. And they would literally, sales is kind of the most entrepreneurial of jobs.
Yes.
Right. And everyone was very like, because it's basically about results. The thing about being an entrepreneur is it's about results.
Yeah.
The thing about being an employee is it's kind of not really about results. It's about time and looking like you're working and like the politics of it. So I think sales is like, how much money did you bring in this week? How much money did you bring in this month? So yeah, they would use a lot of like goals. And one of the guys' backgrounds was like a Rolex. And I was like, what is that? He's like, it's a Submariner. And I'm like, I have no idea what he's talking about. I thought it was called, I didn't know the names of Rolexes, and I would have pronounced it Submariner anyway. But it was like funny. This guy's got like, doesn't have a car, doesn't have a house. And he's like worried about getting a Rolex. And I found that weird. And I think like, that's probably an example of like, because I did economics. Well, it's an example of conspicuous consumption. It's called it's called a Veblen or a Veblen good. It means that this good has value just because it's expensive. So it's the opposite to everything else in economics. Everything else, if the price is lower, the demand is going to be higher. But for some goods,
for Rolex, especially.
For Rolex, for some sports cars, the more expensive it is, the more special it is, the more wanted it is. And so they'll limit the supply, and they'll say we only make a few of these, and etc. So I just think that's crazy. That's crazy. What are you thinking? So you have to ask yourself. But if people want that, no judgment. Like whatever, you spend your money how you want. I believe in abundance. I don't believe that. Oh, you could have spent. You could have fed people with that. Sure, but you can do both. Yeah. And there's not a limited. I don't see wealth as being a limited thing. Anyway, I would say that it's very important to ask yourself if it's what you truly want or if it's what society has taught you. It's what you should want. And the other way I talk about this is I say, go after success, but not the symbols of success. Nice. And people confuse the symbols of success for success. And that's the problem. And the fancy cars and the designer brands and the Rolexes, and that's the symbols of success. Just because it's a visual thing that people can use, that's not actually the thing that will make you happy. What will make you happy is being really competent and really in demand and having a good reputation and feeling good about that. That's the real kind of satisfaction generally is going to come from that.
I think most people I know, they live by the status quo of like what the society wants.
Yeah.
And I feel like as much as I try to tell this or bring this message out, people just don't get it. They are just strictly, they have this in their mind that, oh, I need to get the next Rolex, I need to get the next car. Yeah. Before you even get some investments like a property to live in, people end up buying a car. And don't get me wrong, I have been a victim of this. I've done this as well. I guess it's just how we evolve as a person from school to college, and we don't really, as you are not an entrepreneurial person as well.
Yeah.
I think that's what leads everyone to become a person like that. So do you think school should start implementing some type of kind of something maybe different to what maybe an extra curriculum based on entrepreneurship or based on the things you should really look for in life to build a better life? Is that something, have you ever thought about?
Yeah, I have. And actually there's like a deleted chapter in the book, which was about basically when I started the education chapter in the book. So we have the Miles framework, which we'll probably get into later. But one of the unfair advantages is education. And education, we break it down to 3 values that you can get from education. Number 1 is the actual content itself. Yep. Especially like, let's think of it more as university generally, but it applies to education in general. Formal schooling is the content itself. This is what it should be for, but it's probably one of the least important things it's there for, especially university. Let's say for school, numeracy and literacy, obviously that's important, learning numbers and spelling and reading.
Learning the quadratic equations.
The quadratic equations. That's the bit where when it gets a bit too far, right? You never know. So that's number 1. Number 2 is the connection that you get from going to university or from going to a school, and like the value of a private school, the value of an elite university is who you meet there, which is like, I can't state how important it is. It's like, the whole classic, you're the average of the 5 people you hang out with the most. Yeah, like if you go to school with competitive, smart, ambitious people, confident people, well-connected, then you're going to be that way too. If you go to school with deadbeats, losers, low ambitions, celebrating getting C, then that's how you're going to feel. You're going to be like, oh, I did amazing, I got a B, and that's how you're going to feel. But to be honest with you, so I really went deep in this chapter of like the history of education and what it's there for, and the industrial model, and it's to teach people to become cogs in a machine and to be factory workers essentially. And then just cut it all out because it's out, because it's off theme. One of the things that you learn in communication, you know this, I'm sure, when you create a video, you have to stick to one topic.
Yeah, that's true.
And then if you go off piste, there's only so much off piste you can do. Like, you can only go on so much tangents. It should be its own book. It should be its own thing. So I think the school system is broken because it thinks of education purely as things to learn. Like facts and figures. I think a new way of looking at learning, and I found this so valuable from one of my early business mentors, actually like an online, not an in-person mentor, like literally took his courses online, etc. is learning is behavior change. To define learning as behavior change, which is a whole new way of thinking about learning, because then you think, okay, learning facts and figures is not going to change I was great at learning facts and figures. One of my unfair advantages, I could just pick up different facts and figures. I was quite good at that. That's what helped me with exams, especially when I was still at school. But is it going to change your behavior? Is it actually going to do anything? And it rarely is. And for example, I didn't do history because we had the choice between history and geography at GCSE, and I chose geography. But like later on in my life, I've become really interested in history, and I think it's fascinating and I love it. But at the same time, if you're not going to learn lessons from it and you're just learning facts and figures and you just think it's cool, then cool, that's a cool hobby, nothing wrong with it, but it's not helping your life. It's not helping you to level up. And I think if you define learning as behavior change, I think it's a much more valuable way of looking at it. So I think the whole model is broken. It's literally just teaching people. I think there's obviously a lot of value in teaching people the basic skills when you're primary, secondary school. But I think beyond that, there's only so much you can do. And I think that there are entrepreneurship courses. There are some, I've heard from one of people I've hired, I've heard like the business BTEC is better than the business A-level.
I really agree with that, because my friends have done BTEC business and I have done normal business.
Okay.
And I think I learn way too much theoretical than what they learn practically in that.
Yes. So I think it definitely needs to, so they need to make a distinction between the theoretical subjects and the practical subjects. Yeah. And I think like learning to drive is only so much theory. Yeah. There's a little bit of theory, but really you have to get behind the wheel. Yep. And I think like there's this kind of a new way of thinking about learning, which is just in time learning. So there's this idea, and I used to fall into this trap all the time, and probably people watching this fall into this trap, and they're probably binge watching loads of content, thinking one day I'll start, and one day I'll have enough. And that was me. I was a procrastinator, and I was a perfectionist, and I think, I need to learn more. No, you need to learn to solve the problems that you're facing. Mm-hmm. You need to know just enough to just have a foundation and to be pointed in the right direction. That's what you need. Just get started. And that's scary. And that used to scare the crap out of me. And they used to be like, on the online course that I took, they used to be like, if a client asks you for something, you just need to say, yep, we can do that. And then figure out how to do it. And that used to scare the crap out of me, Jazz. Because I used to be like, what? That's a false promise. What if I can't learn? No, but you can. And this is when you start to trust in your own resourcefulness, in your own creativity, that actually, if you dig yourself in a bit of a hole, which is nothing major, yeah, we can do that. Nothing, life-threatening. Nothing. If you're a surgeon, I don't think I would say, yeah, and then I'll figure it out. No. But like, if it's something that's not going to be that big of a deal, go for it. Say, yes, I can do that. And then figure out how to bloody do it and do it well. Right? But don't just say, no, I don't know how to do that. And just take the pressure off yourself. And I think it's so true that it's about putting pressure. So I think learning needs to be about just in time to solve the problem that you're facing.
I like that.
Right. And I think it always works better. I've just become a parent as we were talking offline. And I bought some parenting books and I dabbled into them a little bit. But now when you're facing a specific problem, your brain gets engaged amazingly. And you've probably experienced this in business or in building, your whole journey of being a creator, etc. Is when you face that problem is when your brain can really learn it. Yeah. When you're just learning it theoretically, you're like, oh yeah. Like learning business, you're doing business A-level or something. You're just like, oh yeah. It's different. It doesn't hit. when it hits is when you have the pain, the emotion is there. You're like, oh my God, how do I solve this? My baby is crying. What do I do? You solve that, and then I can devour books to solve a problem. But let me devour books just on the off chance that I might have a problem. My brain doesn't engage with it as much. So I think that's the problem with schooling, is like it's all like, let's just, front end everything and then you go out into life. Whereas you need to be doing both, and you need to kind of, lifelong learning and solve the problem, but also some foundational. Don't get me wrong. You don't just dive into something. There is some foundational, but the key is to stop when you know enough, just to have the right direction, as I said, and to avoid the pitfalls, the safety, the security, etc. That's important, not just to mindlessly dive into stuff. But once you have the foundations, take the first step. And it's so tough.
And I think in school, it's just foundations, and there is nothing practical. And I like the part where you said about if there's an opportunity, take it, and then you can learn it. And Richard Branson has a famous quote around this as well, that if an opportunity comes your way, take it and then learn how to do it, and then you'll be much more successful. And I think something I also, when I messaged you about your book, that your book is really insightful into things which I knew but I never thought of it in that way. And some of the things could be in the sense that it might be something different to what we're talking about. But when you mentioned how your unfair advantages are stuff like you being in the UK, like myself being in the UK, I never thought about that as an unfair advantage. It also taught me gratitude, how sort of your unfair advantages are something you should be grateful for as well. And the second thing I loved most was the part where you said about perspectives of like, you could be poor, but that is also your unfair advantage, and you could be rich, and that is also your advantage and disadvantage of both. So it really opened my mind into so many ways, and that's why I really like this book so much. And to start off, I really want to dive into this book right now, is just because I want to start off by knowing, how do we already have what it takes to succeed?
Yeah, that's interesting. And funnily enough, that subtitle is interesting. You bring up the subtitle, because actually that's one that I'll actually give the credit to the publishers for. Because what happened was, we were just writing, the initial idea was just this startup book that we were just going to self-publish. And it's about tech startups, and it's cool. And we know it applies in other areas, but especially if you're self-publishing or if you're just creating content, it's better to start off niche. So yeah, there's a whole story behind how we got a publishing deal, which was incredible. A lot of serendipity, a lot of this idea of testing small. And we had this lean version of the book, which was like a 10,000 word version of the book, which is like an hour read, essentially, just to give you the context of the whole book. And then we started to give that out to get some feedback from people. And essentially that's what led us on to getting a publishing deal, which was like, what? We did not expect that, because we have, Ash and myself weren't building public social media. We weren't talking about the success we were having in business, etc. We were just kind of doing it and just kind of being quite private about it. So we didn't have like a following or anything at that time. But yeah, the subtitle came about because I sent off the first draft and I said, I don't think this is it. Ash had pushed me to do it really fast, and I was doing most of the writing myself, and a lot of ideas came from Ash. And I was like, I'm not very happy with this. I said this to the editor. And then she was like, no, this is actually great. I don't know why you're being so harsh on it. I'm like, no, I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm going to show you how much better I can do. And I rewrote from scratch a new one in just a few months. It was crazy. And she was like, okay, this is really good. And actually, we should release this as a hardback. And we should change the subtitle to be not just about tech startups, should make it more general. That's kind of the behind the curtain sneak peek of the idea. And they gave us this idea of how you already have what it takes to succeed. And I was like, is that the message of the book? Because that feels a bit too airy-fairy, too nice, yay, we can all do it kind of thing. And I was like, I'm not sure about it. I was like, Ash liked it, and I was like, I don't know.
I think after reading the book, I think that goes really well.
Yeah,
really well.
Well, that's the thing. I was then one round, and the more I thought about it, I was like, yes, because you define success for yourself, and that's the key. The key is we can't all be Elon Musk's, Jeff Bezos's, etc. But we can have our own version of success.
Yes,
everybody can, and you really do have what it takes to succeed. And it's beyond probably your imagination, that kind of thing. It's like you probably are thinking too small. Very few people actually think delusional, thinking huge and thinking they're going to be the next Elon. Very few actually think that. Most people are kind of like, yeah, if I make it would be great to make $5,000 a month. That would be awesome. My own business. It would make, that's the kind of way that people are thinking more of. So yeah, you already have what it takes to succeed because of what you touched on. This idea of double-edged swords. So to just break it down in general, the unfair advantage is this idea. I used to be really into self-development books. I still am. I still really like them, but I used to read them a lot when I was younger. And this whole American idealistic way of looking at the world of anybody could do it. Come on, just pull yourselves up by your bootstraps. You can all do it. And the underlying assumption was always that everybody's starting off from the same point in life. And business books are the same as well. They always used to just talk about strategy and tactics and just not talk about this idea of like, well, hold on, if you know somebody that works at the company, you can much more easily get them as clients. Bill Gates, his mom was on the board of IBM or something like that. And then she was able to get him IBM as a first client, which is insane. Yeah. And no one talks about that. And this is how life works. But there was no acknowledgement from all these books that this is how life works. So we wanted to be clear, and especially to those kind of more underprivileged startup founders that were pitching us. So when I met Ash, we started getting into angel investing. And they'd sit across from us and pitch. And I'd be like, I work so hard. This is my idea. I'm so ambitious. And we're like, yeah, but you don't have a technical co-founder. How are you going to build this app? You don't have the connections to other VCs and basically investors. You don't this is going to be tough. Like, you don't have any insight into the industry. You don't have any connections in that industry where you're going to get clients. You don't have any previous successes we could look at. You don't have the unfair advantages to succeed. So this was the key. Say hard work isn't enough. We don't live in a pure meritocracy where everybody who works hard enough then is going to be successful. No, it's actually a lot of unfair advantages at play. And we broke down what those unfair advantages are. It's money. So the acronym is MILES. And MILES stands for money, which is a very clear unfair advantage. People just have loads of money or get a rich uncle or something. It's often friends and family that invest first. Then you have I, which is for intelligence and insight. And there's all different types of intelligence that we break down in the book. And insight is the big one, which we can all get. It's not the very privileged one generally. L is for location and luck. Right place, right time. That's the serendipity of it. That's when, people need to, and you know what? Most successful people will acknowledge right place, right time. They will say, I got really lucky. I was very lucky. They would say that. None of them. Yes. Yeah, right. Everybody says it. Everyone acknowledges that, but no one talks about it in business books. L is for location and luck. E is for education and expertise. We touched on education and how education, going to a private school, going to an elite university, getting private tutoring. This is amazing unfair advantage, but also expertise. Expertise is the more practical one, is the more you can learn by doing. You don't need to go to school. You can take an online course. You could learn from YouTube videos, for God's sakes. You don't need enough, all that. And then S is for status. Yeah. Status is how you come across, how you sound, is how people's first impressions of you. It's like, don't judge a book by its cover. Well, the reason that phrase exists is because that's what everybody does. Yep. And in a metaphorical sense as well, not just literally books. They judge people by how they come across. So I think it's important, and within status is also a network, because if you say, if I say I was having dinner the other day with Elon Musk or whatever, like increases your status. Increases your status. Wow. Okay. So that's status, and part of status is also your inner status, how you talk to yourself, and that's kind of the more confident side, and self-esteem side. So those are the broad categories of unfair advantages. You might be listening to this and going, I don't have a rich uncle. I didn't go to an elite school. I'm from a random town. I'm not from the best location. I'm not super intelligent. But the key is, and also part of status is like fame, how many followers you have, etc. Kylie Jenner launched her lip brand. She became the youngest self-made billionaire. It's kind of ridiculous, right? I think the key is to know that there's a benefit to not having anything. Having less money is going to make you more hungry, make you more creative, make you more resourceful. Being in the bad location, it's going to cost less to get office space, going to cost less to get employees. With the internet, you can work from anywhere, really. It's all good. You have a longer runway. With, let's say, you're less educated kind of formally. Well, then Ash was like that, my co-author. He didn't go to university, but, he just picked up books and started learning from them. Or nowadays, you don't need to do books. You could just do online courses or YouTube videos. So I think the key is to understand that you already have what it takes to succeed. You don't need to be privileged to be successful, but privilege can help.
Yes.
And it's just acknowledging the brutal truth of success.
I think I loved the entire Miles framework because it really puts everything you need, technically, just the way you said, to help you understand what it takes to succeed. How long did it take you to not just come with the Miles framework, but from the moment you guys started working on this entire thing to writing the book, how long did it take you?
Yeah, so Ash and I were working on the concept for like a good 3 years before we. So what we would do is we were speaking at startup events, especially Ash at that stage. Speaking at startup events, I brought Ash out to Southeast Asia because I'd been there, he hadn't, and he was kind of free, and he had a startup in Dubai. So we were kind of traveling and talking and discussing this concept, and then he'd talk about it on stage, and then I start talking about it we started like coaching, but we didn't even call it coaching then because I didn't know about coaching. It was like kind of like a mentorship program. We had some startup founders on, and we were testing the idea. We were working and developing the content of it for a good 3 years. Met Ash in 2015, till 2018 we signed the book deal. So yeah, we were working on it for a good 3 years, and it took a long time. I think it was more the concept that took long. People often ask me, how long did it take to write the book? The actual writing didn't take that long. Wrote it quite fast, like a few months, which is crazy, I know, but like a few months. But then you do have some, you have some revisions, drafts, etc. But yeah, the concept took a while, and one thing that we did is we both did TED Talks. So Ash gave one earlier on, and then I gave a TEDx talk. And that really helps you. If you learn how to give a good TED talk, it's like your maximum 18 minutes. And if you look at good ones, it's all about one idea. And that was kind of when I started studying how to write a good book and how to, like, it was all deliberate. It wasn't like we just lucked into it. It was like, no, actually, I looked into how to get to communicate really effectively. Actually, one of my unfair advantages is to be able to communicate effectively, I think. And that helped me get clients and stuff, is because I could explain to them without nonsense and bullshit of like how I can get to them to the top of Google, how this new branding is going to help them, how these ads are going to be more successful, etc. So I think it's that's the bit that took long, is the concept. The concept stage was the hard part. The TED Talks really helped us to really hone it and to really be disciplined to keeping it on theme and on track to one main concept, one main idea, and then build from there.
It's like niching down. If you don't niche down to one specific thing, and you're too broad, just like you said, you had to take out the education part because it didn't really fit in the book. That one chapter which you were talking about. When you were writing, before you even met Ash, did you ever vision yourself you will ever write a book? Not only that, the book which will be a business book of the year. Did you ever?
No. Honestly, I thought, okay, so it's funny you ask, because the first ever version of my business that I tried to start and failed to start, I had my first client in that space, and here's what I called it. This is for experts, consultants, authors, and basically those were my target audience. And I even got one of those clients. It was a psychology lecturer at university, and she had all these amazing ideas and stuff. But what I learned is I pivoted away from that to working with local businesses and just general and traditional businesses, dentists, caterers, tile business, etc. It's because they had more of a cash flow. Whereas people like these kind of experts, etc., like unless they were really already successful, they didn't really have business going on. It was kind of more like they had day jobs and they kind of were doing it on the side, so they didn't have much to invest. But isn't that funny that subconsciously I went towards that without knowing that that's kind of what I want to do? So that's kind of what I was drawn towards anyway. And I think in the back of my mind, I did have this idea that I'd one day write a book. But in my mind, it was when I was in my 40s or 50s. I didn't picture myself getting a book deal in my 20s. That's what really was like, whoa, I did not expect that to happen. So yeah, the answer is yeah. I always kind of thought maybe one day I'd write a book, but I genuinely thought it would be decades away.
It's like everything was destined in the way it happened in your life. And me and Arpan, who's there, we were talking about one thing, which I was like, I don't know if you will relate, but the unfair advantage you have in this current life, do you think they're somehow related to your past life? Because they kind of, your karmas technically, they allow you to have certain things or make you the chosen one in this life. For example, I could be right now in India in a place where I technically had not many opportunities and I wouldn't even be here talking to you. So we were talking about this concept of like maybe the unfair advantages are linked to your past life as well. And we were going something crazy, but we were like, we'll just ask, do you think that is the case? Or do you believe in so I was like, maybe Hasan doesn't believe in.
Yeah. So not reincarnation for me, but I do believe in cosmic justice. And I think some people have an issue with, I mean, this is getting into like beliefs in God and stuff. People have an issue where they say, oh, life is so unfair. How could there be a God when there's so much suffering? And it's like, I feel like there's such a short-sighted vision of God, because it's like you're so small thinking about just one life, here in this world on earth, one lifetime. Whereas even like, for example, as Muslims, we believe in like the land of the atom, they call it, which is before you were born. And this idea of like, there are ideas behind it. I think it's all a bit obscure. No one is really sure. And I'm not an expert in this field, but what I've heard is that you are asked if you want to go. Like you've kind of consented. There's an interesting idea of like, you've consented to going in for this test. Like, well, this life is a test and it's a responsibility. And it's also, there's some enjoyment to it, of course, as well. But you've consented to go into this test. And I think like some people say, yeah, what you did in that life, which is similar to a past life, what you did, I don't know if that even exists as a term, connects with how your life is now. But I think of it more as what coming afterwards will balance everything out cosmically. So I think like what I have in common with the belief in reincarnation is this idea of karma, this idea of cosmic justice. And people are looking for justice in this one life where you're not going to find it because it's too small. Even science tells us there could be other dimensions, there could be other multiverses and universes. And everyone's kind of aware of this idea of like, not everything we're seeing, feeling, touching are aware of is what's there. There is unknowns.
Energy.
Exactly. There's so much unknown. So we can get into the spiritual level. It's about belief in the unseen. And if you have a belief in the unseen, there is already a lot of things which are unseen, which we can measure. There's infrared and ultraviolet rays. And there's things that you can measure, which you can't see. So, or feel, or, so I do believe in that. I do believe that there is something there. But I think like, you can get too very philosophical with it, but I think it really helps to, it's like saying I have to do this versus I get to do this. It's that same concept of like, if you say I get to work on this, I get to, go through this challenge or this struggle because it's going to make me stronger. There's this idea of like stress and how it affects people. And if you believe that stress, and they've done this study where if you believe that stress is going to make you stronger, if you have that belief, then it makes you stronger. Then you don't have the negative effects of stress. But if you have the belief that stress is bad and I've got to avoid stress, those are the people that get high blood pressure and they get the whole heart disease and all of this kind of typical stuff that they associate with stress. So I think a lot of it is your mindset. And I think one of the most powerful things we come back to is gratitude. Just be grateful for where you are in life. If you're watching this, if you're listening to this, there's a ton for you to be grateful for. Everybody has a lot to be grateful for, no matter how bad the situation is, even if it's hard for us to imagine. It's just about looking on the brighter side, the positive side of it, and seeing, okay, what can I do with this? Life gave me lemons. Okay, here's the cards I was dealt. Let me see what I can do with them. That's the idea.
And get the deck in your favor, or something along the lines.
Stack the deck in your favor. Yeah, that's what we say. Yeah, stack the deck in your favor to succeed, because these are the hands that you're dealt. Whatever is your current life situation, you can't change your current life situation right now. Like right now, you can't change it. Like right now, you can't have more money. Like in this moment, you can work towards it. It'll take some time. So the point is, it's like a snapshot of where you are right now. In fact, we've got a quiz. You could take online to find your unfair advantage. We've developed on the unfairacademy.com, I believe. You could take the quiz and it'll give you an idea of where are your unfair advantages. And it's good that I remembered that, because this is the first podcast I've done since we've developed it, I think. Okay. So yeah, it kind of
definitely going to take that.
Take the quiz and see what your unfair advantages are. The point is, and we talk about that in the book about personality and stuff. The point isn't the test is going to give you all the answers. The point is it gets you to think.
Yes.
That's the key, to introspect and to think, okay, what do I have going for me? Okay, how long can I survive if I stopped having an income right now? What's my runway? How much savings or whatever, how much can I go on for? Okay, interesting. What about my location? Is it full of opportunity, or actually should I think about moving? Or what's the bright side of where I live? What about the connections that I know? What about how I come across? How can I leverage that? These are all the things to think about.
I think I really like that. And due to social media and so many videos people are scrolling every day,
Yeah.
their own personality gets covered. And I feel like mine happened because when I kept going through social media and you watch one video and after, oh, do this to become this, do that to become that, this business is the best, this business. And there's so much thing going on that we forget our own self. Like, do what makes you happy. Go look at your own strengths or your unfair advantages, which you can utilize. And I love the part which you mentioned, which again I'm going to go back to, is the gratitude and the perspective. I feel like the two important things this book allowed me to again kind of become more aware of is gratitude and perspective, because these two things are really important when you go look out for happiness. And in my journey, I was at a point before I read this book where finding happiness was harder, and I was feeling like I'm depressed. And as you said, your beliefs can be a big major thing. So I feel like this book definitely allowed me to have the right beliefs, the perspective, and gratitude. The next book you can probably write is based on just mindset, because of how big that is.
It's so
and
big.
I think you have covered it briefly and nicely in here, how that you can change your mindset to become a better person.
Yeah.
There's one specific chapter in this book, which is, I don't know if it's a chapter or it's part of the book, is the reality growth mindset. And I really like that, because I feel like most people start putting goals similar to Elon Musk.
Yeah.
And they're demotivated in like 1 or 2 months just because of how massive the goal is.
Yeah.
How did you come up with that little concept?
Yeah. So one of the things that used to really, one thing that I noticed, I don't know if you noticed the same thing, but like generally the super smart people that come across as smart. I'm not talking about like the successful. There's a bit of a difference.
Smart.
Like the smart people, they don't really like self-development books. And I kind of thought of myself as smart. I'm like, oh, why do I like them? And most people don't like them. Especially here in the UK. It's kind of sneered at. They're a bit like, maybe you read self-help. Like it's kind of like looked down on. And I think, why is that? Like, why is it that people feel this way? And if you listen to sort of the experts or the smart people, they'll say, no, there are. So I'll give you an example. So one thing is that I used to really strongly believe, which I don't anymore, is the whole nature versus nurture debate. This idea of like, are you born a certain way or are you made a certain way? You know, are entrepreneurs born or made? Are salespeople born or made? Are good public speakers born or made? Are good creators born or made? And this idea of like, it's just talent versus, no, it's 10,000 hours and working hard. And it's like, okay, so what's the answer? Is it nature or is it nurture? And I used to, because of all the self-help and development books and concepts, I used to fully believe in nurture. I used to think, okay, I did well at school because my mom used to take me to a library when I was young and I used to read a lot of books. And that's why I'm smart. So I just got a head start and therefore my foundations are better. I'm not smarter than anyone else. I just have a better foundation. And that's why I can pick up things more easily. And I think there's some truth to that. But actually, no, there is such a thing as somebody smarter than somebody else. Like, there is such a thing as talent. There is such a thing as IQ, which is kind of a controversial topic, but it's not controversial in academia. It's not controversial for scientists. They all know it's true, but they don't like to talk about it because it's actually quite. I was researching IQ for that intelligence chapter, and it's like, it was kind of a downer. It was like, oh, you can't really change your IQ. Like, I used to think, like, I thought if I dive into the research, I'm going to find, yes, you can increase your IQ by working hard. Actually, apparently, you can't. Your IQ is pretty fixed. Like, you can kind of do better IQ tests, which is a bit different. Like, if you take a lot of tests, you can improve it a little bit. There was another interesting fact, which is a bit growth mindset, which is this idea that they've done this experiment where they offer cash prizes for getting a higher score. People actually get higher score. So like their motivation level actually gives them a higher IQ.
Wow.
That was an interesting one. But generally, there is such a thing as talent. Again, there's a section in the book called Talent Does Exist. Because in the mid 2010s, let's say, there was a lot of books that came out and said, talent doesn't exist. It's all about the hard work. Talent is a myth. I'm like, no, it's not. Everyone knows it's not. And I think there's sometimes you look at some like research or some scientists who will tell you something where it's like, there's no evidence for this. So therefore, or not even there's no evidence, just like, nope, maybe we were wrong about this, but like everyone knows that's true. And maybe, or sometimes it's a myth, but maybe there's some truth to everyone's anecdotal experience. If you look at music, you look at the X Factor, they talk about talent. They're called talent shows. If you look at sports, people will talk about talent all day, every day. But suddenly, when it comes to entrepreneurship, or it comes to being smart, or it comes to success, no, talent doesn't exist. It's just about how much work you put in. Why is it different? This is silly. So ultimately, it comes down to this idea of you need to understand the limits. Reality growth mindset is about knowing that I'm not going to become the next Messi or Ronaldo. I'm not going to become the next Albert Einstein. I'm not going to win the Nobel Prize in literature. It's just not going to happen for me. Is that, am I thinking too small? Okay, maybe. But it's not. I didn't start training football when I was young. I didn't have some crazy prodigy levels of intelligence when I was a kid in physics or whatever, or literature. So this idea of a growth mindset is an extremely valuable idea. I love it. And I think if you're going to take anything from the book, have a growth mindset. But there are limits. So that's where the reality growth mindset comes in.
I love that a lot. And I was actually just throughout this podcast, I was going to ask you that if there is a particular chapter or part of the book you would recommend someone to please go through because it will help them the most, which chapter would you say, apart from the reality growth mindset?
I would say so the book is broken down to 3 parts. Part 1 is about life is unfair and just explaining what an unfair advantage is. Part 2 is about the Mars framework, which is how do you audit yourself and find your unfair advantages. And part 3 is about how you get started with a business. It's a quick start guide, and it's literally designed to get you pointed in the right direction so that you can then learn by doing, and then problem solve as things come up. So that was the idea behind it. Part 1 is what I would recommend.
Part 1.
Because part 1 is the fundamental philosophy of life is unfair. And people kind of talk about that. People know it. Some people say, why are you being negative? No, it's unfair. Let's not beat around the bush. It's not 2 ways about it. It's really unfair. There's a lot of unfairness in life, and we just have to accept that. That's fine. We can't be idealists. I think the problem is, and especially with Gen Z right now, etc., is idealism. There's too much idealism. Wouldn't it be great if we were all equal? Wouldn't it be great if we all had the same skills? If anybody could choose to be whatever they wanted to be and be a butterfly? Okay, but life is unfair. And actually, Gen Z do know that, because the other side of Gen Z is actually probably even stronger, is the social justice side. And they have this belief that if they cry enough about injustice, then it's going to go away. And I believe that we should work hard to make the world fairer. We absolutely should, but it will never be 100% fair, no matter how much you do it. And that's because of human psychology, because we judge a book by its cover. No matter what, it's going to happen. And so that's what it is. So, okay, if that's how it works, then how can I then play the game? And I think that's the key to the book. The key to the book is this idea of it's not all equal, it's not all fair, but you can find your own level of success. You can define success for yourself. You can define what it is you want out of life. You can reject society's ideas of the symbols of success, and you can build from there, and you can go towards that and find a more fulfilling life, and a life filled with gratitude and fulfillment, but also ambition, and also money, and also to want to be big and want to grow. Why not? So I think that's the main thing that I'd love people to take away. The case study with Evan Spiegel,
yes.
And understanding what he said about his success and how self-aware. This is what blew me away, is how self-aware successful people are. Nearly all of them will tell you, you know what? There was a lot of luck. There was a lot of luck in the journey. I'm very grateful for all the people who've helped me. I'm very grateful for my situation. If it wasn't for this, it wouldn't have been like this. There's a lot of things like that.
I love that so much. And I think part 1 of the book, it hits you so hard that it made me want to keep going on and on and on until the end of the book.
Nice.
And this is actually one of the first books in this year I've finished fully.
Oh, cool.
Or else every book I would be halfway through. Not because I was like, I'm going to meet Hasan or anything like that. But as I said, it just keeps you going and want you to keep reading more and more and more, because every part of the book just has something else in it and allowed me to learn and better my business, I guess. But now I want to move from the lovely conversation about the book to the last part of this podcast, which is the 7 deep Inspired Mind questions. And now, as I said, I call it deep, but they're just normal questions. So the first question is, what's the best advice you've ever received?
Best advice I've ever received. What's the best advice I've ever received? Okay, so sometimes something just pops into your head, and it might not be the best. And maybe if I audited all the advice I've received, there might be something else. But there's something interesting that popped into my head, and it's a bit weird that I'm choosing this one. But there you go. One of the things I did, you talk about how did I push myself outside my comfort zone. One of the things I did is join Toastmasters. Toastmasters is this organization which is all over the world. Actually, I never joined it, funny enough. I just, because you can go as a guest.
Yes.
So I went multiple times as a guest in the London Business School because I wanted to work on public speaking. And one of the things they do is their whole thing is about how do you deliver better as a public speaker in terms of your delivery, not your content. We're not going to focus on content here, which is very clever as an organization. They say, we're just going to focus on your delivery. So what they'll challenge you to do often if you join, and you don't have to. So I really encourage people to actually check out a local Toastmasters, is to give an impromptu talk, like 3 minutes, to go in front of the class and give a talk. It's a very like accepting environment. It's like a safe space to kind of just be nervous and learn. And everyone wants to give feedback and help you. And then they write on bits of paper their feedback and give it to you. And it's kind of an anonymous feedback, and you just read it. And I remember I was so nervous in my first one. Actually, my first one wasn't in the London Business School. It was when I was still at university and I was young. It was like the first time I ever do something like that. I was very nervous, and I went up and I was like, okay, I'm going to push myself to just do it. You don't have to, but I was like, okay, I'll do it. 2 minutes, 3 minutes, give a talk about something. It'll just come to me. And so I did it. And I started off by saying, okay, so I'm really nervous, and this is my first time ever doing this. That's how I started it. And so later, and it went quite well. Later, when I got and I was like very adrenalized, by the way. It's really, it makes you feel alive doing something like that. One of the feedbacks I got was, you did really great. You didn't need to say, you shouldn't have said that it was your first. I was like, interesting. And I don't know why, it really struck a chord with me, because I feel like I asked myself, why did I say it? Why did I say it's my first one? Why do we do that? Think of a bigger picture than just this talk. Why do we love to go, oh, by the way, it's my first time? Oh, but like we want to like lower people's expectations of us, or we want to like lower the pressure and make excuses almost for ourselves when you don't need to. And so the feedback was, you didn't actually even look that nervous. And I had the same for my TEDx talk. You can watch my TEDx talk. It's a good summary of like, if you don't read or you want to check out more of the book, my TEDx talk's on YouTube. And it's basically like the core concept of the thing in 18 or 14 minutes. And I was very nervous. And maybe you could see it a bit when you watch it, but generally not much compared to how nervous I felt during it. Like, and it's interesting because it doesn't necessarily come across. And so this idea of like, you don't need to make excuses for yourself. Just go for it. Really struck a chord with me. Imagine starting a business going, you're my first client. I hope this goes well. It's not the best thing to do. But I never thought of it that way until I read that feedback. Okay, yeah, I am just trying to, be like, hey guys, don't take me too seriously. I'm like diminishing myself or trying to do something like that. And probably that's one of the best advice. I'm sure I've received other amazing bits of advice from my dad. I'll give you another one actually. I'll give you another one from my dad, a bonus one. My dad said, we grew up without, much money, kind of on budgets and stuff. So I had a big habit, and I still had to overcome this of like looking at the price of everything and the value of everything. And maybe it's an Asian thing as well, an immigrant thing. So one thing he told me is don't worry about how much you spend on books. Don't worry about it. Just if there's a book, buy it and read it. And my kind of brokey mindset of like, really? And I never fully, but it helped me to get much more than I would have. But I would still sometimes worry about the price of books back when I was a student. But yeah, that is another amazing piece of advice. Invest in yourself, essentially. Invest in yourself.
I like
and
that.
don't be worried about investing in yourself. So those are the two bits of advice that really impacted me. Have just popped into my mind right now.
I like that so much. And a question from what you just said about the TED Talk. The first TED Talk you got, it was probably nervous, like your nerves were on top of the roof.
Yeah.
How did you even get to that stage from a person who was literally an introvert to a TED Talk? Was there a person who guided you, or was it after you were giving many of the mentoring programs and then you were invited to one?
It kind of started from Toastmasters. So I didn't even go that much. I've been to like total 5 sessions of Toastmasters something. One thing that I realized is, so London Business School is one of the best business schools in Europe. I think it's number 1 in Europe, I believe. And the people there were like, I used to look up to them like, whoa, these people got into London Business School, etc. I was there giving TED talks and giving talks, and I felt like, oh, they're all just as nervous as me, and actually, I'm not bad at this. Actually, I'm probably one of the best ones here. That's how I felt. Honestly, to give an honest answer, that's how I felt. Even though I was so nervous, but I actually just got over it and just started pushing because I'd pushed myself to do it. And also the big one for me is quite early on. Ash pushed me to. He was invited to give the startup summit in Dubai, and he was like, "Oh, I'm going to be in New York. You go on my behalf." And I was like, "What? What are you talking about? Go on your behalf?" Like, yeah, you'll be fine. I'm like, no. I mean, I've done this, my own business. Excuse me. I mean, I've done my own business. It's gone all right. But like, I'm not a startup mentor. No way. Like, I can't. I had a lot of imposter syndrome about it. He's like, go do it. And I was like, oh, it's that feeling of like, I know he's right. I know I need to push myself outside my comfort zone. I know I need to say yes to this. And I was so nervous. This is 2017, I think. And so I went there, and it went amazingly well. It was like hundreds of different startup founders were there, like loads of people, huge audience. It went extremely well. Everyone got a ton of value from what I was saying. From my, like, you often overlook how much you've achieved so far. When you're on a journey, you're always looking ahead. So you always think, oh, I'm not there yet. But actually, if you look back, see how far you've come. And I actually remember the very early stages when I was trying to start a business. I knew somebody who was just like, he'd taken the cohort the year before me, and he had a sale from a client, and it blew my mind that he'd made money. It just blew my mind, and I was like, wow, that's incredible. And here I am, like, having had a recurring revenue passive income business, thinking, oh, I don't have much to share, So I think it's just a case of like seeing people's faces light up, seeing the value people get, and that encouraged me to start doing more public speaking, essentially. So that was the first event. It was, funnily enough, international, my first one.
Wow, in front of that many people as well.
And in front of loads of people. Yeah, it was crazy. Yeah.
And I think imposter syndrome is something which every one of us have, of like, we're never better. And if we keep looking to better ourselves, we'll realize we'll reach Elon Musk's place that normal people won't even relate with us. Yes. So I think that's something I have figured out. And that's why when I share a piece of advice, I just think of me giving my advice to a person who was me just a year back.
Exactly. So, and often people who are like Ash had already had almost 20 years of business experience. He didn't go to university, started his business when he was 18, 19 years old. So he actually could relate much less to people because it was too far gone for him. And for him, he's kind of more of a natural entrepreneur. I talk in the book about how I'm an unnatural entrepreneur. I took a course, I was nervous, so actually I can relate to people more, and that's actually made me a better coach because now I can really empathize and be like, I know how that feels. I know you're being perfectionist here. Listen, what's the one action you need to take for the coming week? Okay, what's the highest leverage thing you could do? Can I hold you accountable to that? Okay, great, cool. Let's do it. Let's talk next week. And it's very valuable, and I think that's how that's worked.
I think I really agree with that, and that's something I keep reminding myself over and over again. But that was once again lovely little bit of insight for me as well. I will move on to question number 2, which was, what's the worst piece of advice you've ever been given?
What's the worst piece of advice? I think what comes to mind is the personal finance one, which is this idea of saving money to become wealthy. And honestly, it's one of the worst pieces of advice you can ever receive, is to think that you're going to become wealthy by saving money. And I hear this a lot, and I don't know if you hear this as well. Sometimes, this is quite common, by the way. Some wealthy people, or seemingly wealthy people, let's say, are quite stingy. And they'll like negotiate on things and stuff. And you'll be like, whoa, I think you're a multimillionaire. What are you doing? But it happens. This does happen. And some people will be like, how do you think they got wealthy? And I'm like, no, that's not, they didn't get wealthy by being stingy. They didn't get wealthy by saving, especially in this day and age. Maybe you can, I'll tell you, it can kind of work if you invest, and over 50, 60 years, it can kind of work. But then now we're talking about people over 60 who are doing okay. Not even that well. Like they're like, okay, yeah, they might barely be millionaires, and now they're in their 60s, like that. But if you find anybody under 40 who's wealthy, they did not get there by saving. Of course, don't spend more than what you earn. Yes. Of course, don't, like, there are some basics which is just so blatant. Do I even need to say it? Like, don't spend all the money that you make. Oh, obviously, don't go into debt. But that's such basic advice that it's so silly to tell people, yeah, it's because of your lattes at Starbucks that you can't afford a house. Like, come on, it's because of avocado toast. It's so stupid. And I think that's one of the worst bits of advice is to, saving is a good thing. Look, don't get me wrong. But being frugal, being stingy, worrying about the pennies, look after the pennies and the pounds will look after themselves. Nonsense. It applies if you're running very low margin business. Yeah. If you want to start the next Ryanair, yes, you have to look after the pennies. If you want to start maybe Asian cultures with this kind of businesses that we start, it's all about like low price, yes, wholesale, volume. Fine. You do. Personally, you probably don't, maybe in the early stages. Once they become wealthy, they can become wealthy from those types of businesses too. Once they're wealthy, they don't need to look after the pennies. And they often don't. They often do spend a lot once they do make the money. But in the business, sure, you need to have very tight financial controls. You need to keep the costs low. You need to negotiate hard with the suppliers. Fine. But that's in the business. And I understand if you're broke that you do need to look after the pennies. Fine. But that habit stays with you. And yes, it's one of the worst things is to keep it with you, because the key to making more is to have an abundance mindset and making more, because there's so much more you can make versus how much you could save is so limited. So it's very key to just think, how can I make more money and how can I spend and invest the money? Not spend as in just like that, but invest the money. How do I create something exciting for myself? How do I create? And generosity, I think, is very, very important. And I think one of my early mentors taught me this, actually. He's like, I used to have the mindset of like saving. And he's like, yeah, you've got to spend money to make money. And it's like, it's not just, he was talking about like spending personally for like taking his family out or something. It wasn't like an investment. And he was like, yeah, and this idea of like, you got to put into it to get out of it. And it's just like, think of the economy in that way. You're thinking, you have to have an abundance mindset when it comes to wealth. And I think the worst piece of advice is look after the penny and the pounds will look after themselves.
I think I really, really resonate with that, because when growing up, I was forced to think with the mindset of save every penny and only then you'll become rich.
Yeah.
And the video which is going live today on my YouTube, there's a concept I talk about, the fast lane. So the book, The Millionaire's Fast Lane, people choose the slow lane, which is sacrificing your today for tomorrow. And that you getting rich in 60 years relies on you not dying, your job, and the stock market always going up. So I feel like the concept of saving every penny or investing in the S&P 500 is something I used to give, but now I've stopped doing that. I always say only do that if you prefer doing that.
Sure.
But the better way is to start a business.
Yep.
Start a business which can generate you millions in much shorter time, in the time where you can also enjoy that and gain the freedom. Because if you still keep working, then technically even having a million by the age of 60 is useless, because you haven't spent time with your kids and all the stuff like that. I just wanted to ask one more question before I move on to the next one, which was when you spoke about spirituality and abundance right now, it triggers the law of attraction in my mind. Do you believe in the law of attraction?
I believe in it in the sense of having a vision is very valuable and feeling it and believing in it. But that's it. There's so much more. I feel like it's extremely limited because it doesn't talk about the actions that you need to take. And I think it's a good starting point to have. I think the key, we touched on this, is think about the what is the vision and don't worry about the how, and let the how take care of itself.
Yeah.
Initially, step one. Step two is then to think about the how. I think they talk about only step one, and that's the problem.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to say, like, shout out to MJ DeMarco and Millionaire Fast Lane. I love that book, and it was one of the most influenced. I mentioned Work Week. My actual biggest influence was MJ DeMarco's The Millionaire Fast Lane. And we were talking about our mutual friend James Janney. I mean, you met him at the creator meetup that I'd done. And funnily enough, he came to my book launch event, which was cool serendipity. We stayed in touch. He's a good friend. He was very inspired by Millionaire Fast Lane. We recommended it to Ali Abdal, and I think it was mostly me to give Millionaire Fast Lane. And then he done a summary of it on his YouTube channel as well. And he loves
done
it
a
too.
beautiful summary of that book.
Great book. I love it.
Yes, 100%. We'll move on to now the third question is, what is your definition of success?
Yeah, awesome. Okay, let's do this. My definition of success. I think the way I would define success is I have, and it's difficult to get something more specific than this, but I've lived up to my potential. I have not squandered the gifts that God has given me. And I think we've all been given gifts by God. I think that we have to, I think the key to that fulfillment, because real success isn't like happiness, like pleasure, but it's more fulfillment. And I think the key to fulfillment is to feel like you've lived to your potential, or at least close to it, because you kind of never feel like you've doing to your full potential. But at least to be like, yes, I gave that my all. I developed that talent into a real skill, and I used it for good. So for me, I think success is about using it for good, helping others, spreading opportunity. The biggest thing for the book is spreading opportunity, or the unfair academy, the unfair advantage. Spread opportunity. I don't believe in equality of outcomes, because people don't put in the same level of work or the same ambition or the same focus. But I really believe that if we can get as close as possible to equality of opportunity, or the closer we get to it, the better. So I'd love to do that. I'd love to help level the playing field in terms of helping to make things a bit more available for people. I think one of the biggest unfair advantages is just knowing that these opportunities exist. Yeah. It's huge. We talk about that in the Tristan Walker story in the book, where he grew up in like the projects in Queens, and kind of the only role models were like athletes and rappers, and then the only people who were wealthy were drug dealers. Yeah. And if you grow up in that kind of environment versus if you grow up like Evan Spiegel, where it's like, yeah, we'll help you get into Stanford, and yeah, you can get the mentors of these amazing people from like, I don't know, Google or Intuit, these big software companies and stuff. It's a big difference. Yeah. And I'd love to spread opportunity more around the world, around even within the country, but even around the world. So for me, success, I would define it as I've lived up to my potential. I haven't squandered the gifts that God's given me. I've used them. I've helped to level myself up. I've helped to become somebody. So I don't believe in leadership, but I believe in like, it's all about leading by doing. Yes. Or leading by being, almost.
Something you referred to previously in this podcast, which I couldn't refer back to, was the one thing I like about you is that, which I try and do every time, is that if I want to inspire someone to do something, I will do it and show it first. And that hopefully will result in them being inspired, rather than me being like, oh, go work out. But if I'm not working out and I'm fat, then it doesn't make sense. So I think I like that a lot.
I mean, I've recently become a father. So like one of the questions, I think somebody on Twitter put a question of, what are you looking forward to as a father? And I think for me, it's leading by example. Really need to live it. And it's like, I'm challenging myself to step up. And that's key. I think that's absolutely key.
That's one parenting advice I was given like 2 years ago, even though I'm not a father, which I always think about, like when I get my first child, this is something I have to remember every time, because they will see the things I do and learn from that.
Yeah. The worst thing you could say is, do as I say, not as I do.
Yes.
Wow. That's awful, because it's going against human psychology, completely going against it. Because people they do what you do, not what you say.
Yes.
And that's important, to live it.
That. Yeah. And I like how the way you're self-aware, and the way you gave your definition of success is about yourself, like you related it to yourself. Most people would say their definition of success is something which is not even related to them, and it's something external. So I like your answer so much.
Thank you.
The next question is, what was the hardest moment in your life?
Hardest moment. I mean, I think one of them we touched on is when I felt completely lost. And I was like, that was the closest I've come to being depressed. I don't know if I've ever had depression. I don't know how to define depression. The closest I used to think like, well, I'm depressed because of my situation. So is that depression? Or is depression something just a chemical thing? But the point is, that's the closest I've come probably to that feeling. I just felt lost. It was more of a feeling of lost and aimless, and felt a bit alone. I felt a bit like just out I needed people around me who are inspired, and I think like that's what would have been a benefit probably to going to like to being clear about what I wanted to do, to working towards that, to going to like, let's say, even a more elite university. Like everybody around you, although they could be in a very misguided way, but at least they're very driven.
Yep.
And I think drive is important, and I think obviously there are downsides to it, but I think that's what comes to mind now when you say one of the hardest things. I've faced other difficulties of family health issues, things like that. There are a lot of other down moments like that. But I think in general, I'm quite an optimistic person, quite a positive person. Yeah.
I like the answer as well. I love that. And when you spoke about depression, I think I never classify I was depressed, but I think the rut, when you don't know, you can't be asked to do anything. You're just so like, oh, I just want to sleep all day, watch
like
movies.
A slug,
yes,
awful feeling.
I think that's the feeling I can describe most, to basically being burnt out. But I don't know how depression feels. The next question is, what's your biggest regret in life?
Biggest regret? What do I regret? It's hard to answer these questions because there are small things that are regrets. I think people say I have no regrets. I think, well, it's just quite unself-aware or uncritical of, you look back on your life, surely you could find something that you could have done better.
Yes.
You could have been better. But again, you touch on the whole thing, oh yeah, because my mistakes made me who I am today, and that classic line. I regret not doing more when I was younger. I regret taking so long to figure out what I'm good at and what I enjoy. And I think it's a journey. And I think you have to do that by doing more things and trying more things. And I think I would see some people who would work a lot, like even as students, even in sixth form or whatever, like they have jobs and stuff, and they'd work a lot of hours, and then they'd also spend a lot. And I don't think, I'll just not bother. I won't spend a lot and I won't work a lot either. And I think that's kind of a mistake.
Yeah.
It's not about the spending, it's about the learning by doing and about who you become by working. And I think I should have tried more jobs, and I think I should have tried more industries, and I think I should have had more hobbies. I should have, I'll tell you one regret as well, this just popped into my mind. But yeah, trying more things in general is general advice I give to people who are young. It's very important to find yourself, to self-awareness. The big theme in the book is know thyself, self-awareness. I'll give you another small one. I had a really fixed mindset when I was young about playing football. I'm not good at football. I'm not going to bother. And very young, I kind of decided that, which is really bad. And I regret that. It was like, that's a shame. Because I used to think, oh yeah, when you get older, it won't matter anyway. Like people still play it. Even now I'm in my 30s, people are still playing. I should have done that, I should have pushed myself. I could have learned. I was still young, but I always thought I was too late. I feel like that's a metaphor because you always feel like I was too late to get into this. I'll give you another one. YouTube. I remember in 2012, one of my early he was going to be a client but didn't become one. It was one of these experts, authors. He was an author and a psychologist. And he kind of did a bit of, he was asking me some questions about myself, some deep questions. Like, yeah, I like cooking and stuff. I was telling him at the time. He's like, why don't you film yourself and put it on YouTube? I was like, YouTube is done. In 2011, 2012, I was like, YouTube is done. I'm too late to YouTube. I'm too late to the game. That's how I felt. And I just felt like, I'm not good enough. I remember I told you I was really obsessed with like nutrition and stuff. People used to tell me, you should write a book because I used to know so much. Like, you should write a book about this. And I'd be like, nah, it's done. It's like, what do I know? I'm just repeating what I've read, not realizing that that's enough, because I'm just like curating from a lot of blogs and a lot of different readings and studies and stuff like that, thinking that that's just normal. Anyone could just do that. How is that a skill? Not realizing that actually people get a lot of value out of that. Actually, I could have probably started coaching people from then, because I actually had I remember I lost weight then, and I was slim for like years until like more recently. And a lot of people lost weight because of me, friends and family and stuff. And they'll be like, I'm on the Hasan diet and stuff. And I used to it was incredible. So I think it's often that you feel late to a party and you think it's too late. For me, learning to play football or getting into YouTube. The other thing is not realizing your strengths or trying a lot of things is the one I already touched on. And the other is not realizing that something is a strength because it comes easy to you. And you assume that it comes easy to everyone else. And that one's a big one.
I love the last one as well.
Yeah.
And I think the part about where you said you think you're late, I think many people will resonate with that because they think, oh, I'm in my 40s. How can I start a business?
How can I start? Or TikTok is already done.
Yeah.
Oh, if only I started in 2020.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of thing.
I started YouTube in 2020
Yeah.
and now I have over 150,000 subscribers. Imagine I made my first video in like 2015 on YouTube, and I thought YouTube was just like it's too saturated. So many people are doing it.
Yeah.
I
thought it was too saturated for me to do. I did web design.
Oh yes, when you first started.
The first like version of my business was like, I'll build a website for you, and I would like outsource it from the beginning. By the way, I wouldn't code it myself. And I was like, who would want that? It's not the 90s.
Yeah.
Who needs web design? Surely everyone's got web design by now. And it's like, it's so funny because you really think that everything is saturated, and this ties into the whole like, it's too late for YouTube, it's too late for TikTok. No, there's so much opportunity.
Yes.
So much opportunity still out there. If you study economics, you think that everything's at an equilibrium. No, supply equals demand. Everything's at equilibrium. There's no real opportunities. It's so stupid. Like this theoretical view versus a practical view. I think economics was an interesting subject and a great subject in terms of teaching mental models and how to model things. But to understand that no one knows what the hell's going on is very important. It's very important to know that economists don't know what the hell's going on. They won't. Pretty much no clue, but it's actually a very valuable discipline. Obviously, they have more of a clue than most people. It's iffy.
Somewhat.
Iffy.
Yeah.
You know, so they didn't predict, the 2008 crash. They thought that there will be a crash from 2020, but it didn't really happen. But then now it's happening.
They're still trying to predict the recession, and no one knows when it's coming. Well, technically, no one knows when it's coming.
I mean, yeah.
Wow. The next question is: top 3 books to help you unleash your full potential, in your opinion.
Full potential. I've already mentioned How to Win Friends and Influence People. I think it's very, very important. Relationships, very important. We've already mentioned full potential. If we think of it in terms of like financial and stuff, Millionaire Fast Lane is great. I would like to think that our book, The Unfair Advantage, is in there.
That's the number before first, so that's
awesome.
there already.
So what else will I recommend? Atomic Habits was great. Should I put it as one of the 3, or is there something else that can come to my mind right now off the top of my head? Other books that have been really impactful. Yeah, I think I'd say Atomic Habits is one of them.
Those are 3 great books because it teaches you about speaking, habits, and business.
If you look up Hasan Kubba recommended reading, there's a Blinkist asked me when the book came out. They did a summary of the book, and they asked me for a list. So I now can't remember exactly everything that was on the list, but it's a list of 10 books. If you look that up, you can find out the books I recommend as well. So yeah,
I'm gonna check.
There's some coaching books that I've read recently that were really good as well. The Coaching Habit, I believe, is one of them. Really good book. It's a really good way of like how to lead, you don't even necessarily need to be a coach. It's how to coach yourself, how to lead others, how to manage people, how to parent, all of these things is like an amazing habit. So yeah, these are the things that come to my mind.
I might have to read that book. So when you said about how to manage people, how to become a better leader, I guess in that sense as well. Yeah,
coaching is a very important skill.
Yes.
Good bosses don't tell you what to do; they ask you. Right? I don't know if you've experienced it, but they'll be like, "Oh, what do you think that we need to do?" And then you'll say it, and they'll be like, "Oh, can you do that by?" And then you're like, you'll think, "Okay, I can't be too far ahead." Friday, okay, cool. So by Friday, I'll have it. Yeah. You've said what you're going to do. He didn't tell you, so you're much more likely to do it. It's very powerful.
I like that. And
Same with kids.
I was watching your podcast with Ali as well, and there was a part where you guys were talking about coaching, and the part where you said asking questions. Like you have a consultant who will give the answers, but a coach will ask you questions.
Exactly.
And that really hit me. I was like,
yeah.
A coach will really dig you into your things you need to really discover yourself.
I thought it's a negative. Yeah. I was like, oh, that's so annoying, asking questions. Just give me an answer, for God's sake. Like it's, but actually, no, it's very valuable.
There's really something else to it. And the last question is, what are the 3 habits that got you where you are right now?
3 habits that got me to where I am right now. I think I have to say the first thing is the type of influences that you have in your life. By far, it's the biggest hack. It's now become well known, but people don't do it, and I still don't do it enough. Is who do you spend time with?
I really agree with that.
It's the most powerful thing. It's like the most passive way of helping yourself, if you know what I mean. Like you don't need much discipline if you're just hanging around the right people. You just make sure. So for me, it's the people I hang around with. It's number one. 3 most biggest habits is people I hang around with. Number 2 is pushing myself outside my comfort zone, specifically with initiating conversation, reaching out. It's tough. I haven't done outreach for a while because I haven't needed to. And I remember for the US release of the book, I wanted to reach out to a few US authors, but it was like cold outreach, kind of didn't have the intros. Man, it's tough. Psychologically, it's not actually hard sending emails out, but psychologically, it's hard.
Yeah.
So like the sales, think of it like sales or outreach. It's like that is the second skill. First of all, it's who you hang around with. Second is like the sales / outreach / striking up conversation with people that we touched on earlier in this podcast. And the third habit, what's been the biggest habits that have helped me? I would say for me, it's about having a high standard. I think that's what made the book successful. Is I was like very
sort of perfectionism, but
yeah. So that could be the negative, which is why I'm like hesitating to say it. But genuinely, it's important. Quality is important. I know everyone goes on about quantity and it leads to quality, and it's true. It's very powerful, and actually, that's where I'm weaker. Maybe another way of saying this is partnering up with people who have complementary skills and mindsets to yourself. So for me, Ash was a very good influence because he was all about, let's just get shit out there. Quantity. Let's hit the deadline. Let's work fast. And I'm more the quality. Let's make sure it's good. Together, we're good. Separately, it's not good. Yeah. Like low quality posts. What's the point? Who cares? Posting frequently, but low quality. And then good quality, but never posting. It's not good either. So I think that's why the book came out good, because Ash pushed the deadline hard. And then I was like, no, but it's got to be amazing. Those two together. So I think it's really important to focus on quality. Don't let that hold you back. That's what held me back initially from starting my first business. I didn't tell you the punchline to that. It was like, my website needs to be perfect. I need to work on the copy. I need to make it amazing. And then guess what? I never launched the website, and I got clients, and I never needed the website.
And I think you went back to a job, right? I mean, you went to a job.
I went to a job. No, but what I mean is the job is not the relevant part. I never launched the website, but then I started to get clients.
Oh, without even actually.
So here's the irony, Jad. I had a web design business without a website, and it did well. It didn't need a website. Sometimes you think that you need something. I need to make it perfect, but maybe you don't.
Yeah.
Maybe you could just go straight to the thing that you want, which is to get clients. And clients just went by what I said. And I built trust. And I guess that was my strength, is to build trust with them and to talk to them and not bullshit them and not use jargon. Tell them, this is what we're building. Here's how it works. Here's what it looks like. Okay, I'll get a design mock-up done up for you. Okay, if you like that, I'll create that. I think I used to create design mock-ups. Oh my God, I haven't thought about this for years. I think I used to create design mock-ups and spend money with designers to give it to clients and be like, here's how your website could look.
It's great. You've done something great there, because in the recent years of making an offer, which is undeniable, like you can't say no to, that's one of the core elements of it, is you make something for them without getting anything in return. And it's an offer they can't say no to because it will look so good. Yep. And they will just take it and they will want to pay you instead as well.
So like right now, I get a lot of people who want to become like editors reaching out. Oh, we can edit your TikToks, we can edit this and that. And okay, well, why don't you instead literally just edit something?
Trust me,
for me,
Hasan,
right?
There are the amount of emails they send saying, I will edit your TikToks, I'll make you a longer form of into short. But none of them send a bloody edited version.
Yeah. Send me a video. If it's good, or even post it on TikTok.
Yeah.
And then let's see if it gets traction. It gets traction. I'm like, oh, this editor's good. Maybe hire this editor. Yeah. Like, prove by doing, and it takes courage, because you're like, oh, but the risk is they won't like it. Oh, well, okay, then that's the risk. Yeah. Take the risk. And that's the key. So I think that's the funny thing. The irony is I launched a web design business without having a website. And so my perfectionism can definitely hold me back, but I would say it's still one of the habits. Quality is what's important. So yeah, you have to get the right balance. Obviously, I'm too much on the quality side, some people too much on the quantity side.
I like that a lot, and the 3 habits you described really well define your kind of journey as well, and who you are as a person. And one thing I love about what you done is you didn't build the website, you just went and marketed your business. It allows you to also see if the business is even going to work.
Exactly.
And so I done that recently with one of the businesses.
Nice.
I tried it with 2-3 clients. I saw no interest. So I'm like, okay, this looks nice in my head, but in reality, it's not a offer no one will agree to.
Perfect. Yeah.
So
You don't need to build the whole product, right?
I was
the
first
key.
gonna build the website, get emails, this. I'm like, this time, let me try a different approach. Let me
Yeah.
not do anything here. Let me just go straight into this
Yeah,
part.
talk to people, isn't it? Yeah.
I done that, and I realized it was the best decision I make. So, great conversation. Loved it. Loved each and every minute of this. And everyone listening to this right now, please, I highly recommend you go get a copy of the Unfair Advantage. We have 10 here, which we are going to get signed by Hasan, and then hopefully when we have Ash on the podcast again in the future, we'll get another 10 signed to send it to you guys, and I will give more information on that on my Instagram. So make sure you are followed there. So when I do post the post, you get this book from me, or else just go buy it from Amazon. It's literally the best investment you will make in your life, and that's what I've made in 2022, the best investment for myself. So once again, thank you so much, Hasan, and check out Hasan's social media and everything, link in the description. Hopefully we see another amazing book in the near future from him or both the authors of the book again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been really fun.
Really a pleasure one more time. Thank you.
Thank you.